The morning sun bathed the quiet cul-de-sac of Rosebridge Estates in a warm, golden light. Lawns were manicured to perfection. Each house looked like it belonged in a magazine, and the HOA rules were strictly followed, if not revered. Karen Delaney stood by her bay window, sipping her decaf soy latte, as she did every day. At 53, recently divorced, and childless, she had invested her identity in keeping the neighborhood safe and orderly. She considered herself the unofficial overseer of Rosebridge. Any unusual activity passed through her scrutiny. That morning, something unusual did occur. A large matte black truck pulled into the empty driveway of the house next door, the one that had been on the market for 6 months after the previous owners relocated to Tokyo. Karen squinted, her gaze narrowing like a hawk's. A man stepped out of the truck. Tall, broad-shouldered, and distinctly out of place, or so she thought. He was black, in his mid-30s by the looks of it, and dressed in dark clothes that looked neither casual nor professional. Functional. That unsettled her. She watched as he opened the back of the truck and began unloading large, metallic crates. They weren't moving boxes, at least not the kind she was familiar with. These were sealed, cold to the touch even from a distance, and humming faintly with a low, mechanical sound. Karen's latte paused midair. She zoomed in with her phone camera and took photos discreetly through the blinds. She tapped the neighborhood watch app and scrolled through the list of recent notifications. Nothing. No mention of a new neighbor. No clearance. No move-in update. That was odd. Everything in Rosebridge had to be proved. She decided to take matters into her own hands. Karen picked up her phone and dialed 911 double quotes. Yes. Hello, she said, voice pitched with concern. There's a suspicious individual unloading equipment next door. No moving van. No paperwork. And I don't recognize him. I don't feel safe. Is the individual behaving aggressively? The dispatcher asked in a neutral tone. No, but he's acting strange. He has these metal crates, and I don't know what he's doing. Ma'am, what makes you feel unsafe? Karen hesitated. The question threw her off. He doesn't belong here, she finally said. Something's not right. He doesn't fit the neighborhood. The dispatcher was silent for a moment longer than usual before replying. Units are being dispatched. Karen ended the call and stared outside again. The man was now placing a strange dome-shaped object on the grass, connecting it to one of the crates with a glowing filament. It pulsed blue every few seconds. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but he appeared to be talking into a wrist device that didn't look like a phone. Her stomach churned with unease. This isn't just someone moving in, she muttered aloud, as if responding to her thoughts. CivicNet, the AI integrated neighborhood system, chirped on her wall panel. Resident record not found. Data packet incoming from law enforcement. Her pulse quickened. Across the street, Mrs. Patel walked out to collect her mail. Karen almost called out to her, but stopped herself. What would she say? There's a man outside doing science. She wasn't even sure what he was doing, but something about it felt foreign. Wrong. She returned to the window, watching every movement he made with a mixture of suspicion and escalating paranoia. As the seconds ticked by, she began to imagine. What could be inside those crates? Devices, chemicals, surveillance equipment, terrorist tech, alien artifacts. The thoughts tumbled in her mind with increasing urgency, completely detached from reality. When the black and white police cruiser turned the corner, followed by 2 floating AI drones, Karen felt a sense of righteousness bloom inside her chest. Finally, someone would validate her concerns. Finally, someone would make things make sense. But what the officers and the drones would discover wouldn't just shatter her assumptions. It would dismantle her entire view of the world. Asterisk, the 911 call triggered a chain of protocols far more complex than Karen could imagine. In the year 2037, emergency services operated under the oversight of neural ethical AI, known as SENT, nationwide system designed to assess not just the content of emergency calls, but the subconscious intent behind them. Every call was recorded, analyzed, and logged against both social and psychological metrics, ensuring that the justice system could not be manipulated by fear, bias, or prejudice. It was a quiet reform, implemented after decades of civil unrest and growing distrust in law enforcement. When Karen's voice hit the system, the algorithm immediately detected certain flags: her increased heart rate, the loaded phrasing of "doesn't belong," and the subtle but statistically significant hesitation before admitting her discomfort was based on appearance, not behavior. The system didn't outright reject her call, but it reclassified the priority level and appended an intent review tag to the dispatch. Officer Jerome Hill, a seasoned field agent with 15 years on the force, was sitting in his cruiser in Sector 3 when he received the alert. A soft chime sounded, and a transparent AR screen unfolded across his windshield. The dispatch read, "Suspicious person report, Class 3 tag. Bias check initiated, address 407. Evergreen Loop, civilian, concern, feels unsafe due to appearance and behavior. Emotional accuracy score, 63%. Sentinel net, bias probability index, 79.6% Jerome sighed. These were becoming more common in suburban sectors like Rosebridge Estates. He tapped the acknowledgement button, and the system automatically deployed to patrol aerial units. Both compact AI-powered drones equipped with facial scanners, heartbeat monitors, and behavioral analytics. The drones buzzed to life at the central station and zipped out into the sky, heading for the location at speeds faster than any cruiser. Their purpose was simple: observe and record, assess threat level, and offer real-time data to the responding human officer. As Jerome drove toward the address, the feed from the drones began streaming onto his dashboard. One drone hovered silently, about 30 feet above the suspected man, identified through facial recognition as Dr. Elias Vatu. The file was extensive but restricted under a classified UN database. Jerome had partial access. Physicist, multiple PhDs, clearance level unknown. Last known employer Department of Dimensional Sciences. That wasn't even a public agency. The other drone focused on the environment. No weapons, no raised voices, no signs of aggression. Just a man arranging strange, high-tech devices in a meticulous, deliberate manner. But something about the equipment defied categorization. The crates emitted frequencies that didn't register on normal spectrums. The filament cables glowed faintly, yet no heat signatures were detected. The dome-shaped object on the grass emitted a gravitational ripple barely noticeable, but enough to cause birds overhead to shift formation. Jerome frowned and tapped into CivicNet's neighborhood records. Sure enough, there was no official move-in notice. No delivery records, no HOA approval. But there was a soft override key on the property file coded in diplomatic encryption. Diplomatic override. Jerome muttered. In a residential neighborhood, the system didn't respond. Instead, it pinged his cruiser with a priority caution notice. Do not escalate. Observe only. Await further clearance. By the time Jerome arrived at the scene, the drones had already completed an emotional assessment of both parties. Karen stood outside her front door, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes locked on her new neighbor, her vitals spiked with adrenaline and indignation. She expected backup. She expected enforcement. Dr. Vatu, on the other hand, was calm, almost serene. His pulse never deviated. When he saw the police cruiser, he didn't stop working. He looked up once, nodded politely, and returned to adjusting a crystalline interface panel on one of the devices. The drone chimed again. Threat assessment. Low. Civilian mental state. Heightened prejudice. Detected situation. CONT9. Jerome stepped out of the car, slowly, leaving his weapon holstered. Let's see what the hell this really is, he muttered. He had no idea how far down the rabbit hole this call would take him. The cruiser door closed with a soft click as Officer Jerome Hill approached the man in the driveway. The air shimmered faintly around the strange dome-like device, and an unusual silence hung over the neighborhood, like the world itself was holding its breath. Dr. Elias Vatu turned toward him, his eyes calm and unreadable. He was tall, but not imposing. His movements were efficient, deliberate, and carried a sense of unspoken precision. There was no fear in his demeanor, a quiet awareness of the escalating situation. Good morning, Officer Vatu said smoothly, as if he had expected this visit. His voice had a strange, musical resonance, like there was an echo behind it, barely perceptible, as if two versions of him were speaking a millisecond apart. Morning, sir, Jerome said, glancing briefly at the humming equipment. Got a call about some activity. Mind if I ask what's going on here? Certainly not, Vatu said, stepping aside. I'm in the process of installing a localized dimensional stabilizer. Nothing hazardous, I assure you. Jerome raised an eyebrow. A what now? Vatu gestured toward the largest metallic crate, which had now unfolded into a tripod-like machine with a slowly rotating central core. You can think of it as a harmonizer, a device designed to ensure dimensional congruence in regions experiencing quantum instability. Earth, unfortunately, is approaching one of those thresholds. The officer stared blankly for a moment. And you're installing that in a suburban neighborhood? Yes, Vatu said without a hint of sarcasm. The geospatial readings indicated that this location, 37.998 N, 122.04 to W, is a critical junction point. Subsurface data showed a rare energy convergence node intersecting the chronomagnetic fault line beneath this area. Jerome blinked. Right, okay. Do you have any ID? Of course. Vatu tapped his wrist device, and a thin blue light projected into the air between them. A holographic badge appeared. United Nations Dimensional Research Initiative. Clearance level Indigo 7. Authorized personnel. Jerome's own CivicNet visor buzzed, running a secondary verification through encrypted channels. The response was instant. Classified record, authentic credentials confirmed, do not impede. Cooperate as necessary, level 2 intervention cleared for civilian. COONTA. Jerome exhaled slowly, not entirely understanding what was happening, but recognizing enough to know this wasn't above-board government business. It was something deeper, bigger, possibly not of this world. Behind him, Karen was still watching from her porch, arms crossed like a sentinel of righteousness. Her expression twisted in confusion when she saw Jerome nod respectfully to the man instead of questioning him aggressively. I realize, Vatu said, following Jerome's gaze, that my arrival may have unsettled some. But secrecy was paramount. We weren't expecting full public integration until next cycle. Public integration? Jerome asked, crossing his arms. Yes, Vatu said. We're preparing for the next phase of the dimensional accord. By 2040, humanity will need to be aware of the interweaving realities that share their plane. The fractures between dimensions are no longer stable. Earth has always been, porous. It's just that no one noticed before. Jerome's pulse quickened. He glanced back at the drone feed and saw the readings. Localized gravity distortions, ambient energy spikes, microsecond time lapses around the dome. So you're saying the world's breaking apart? In a way, Vatu said, more like ungrading. Reality was never meant to hold so many versions of itself. But don't worry. That's why I'm here. The dome pulsed once, then stabilized. The faint shimmer in the air subsided. Jerome stepped back, trying to reconcile what he'd just heard. He had responded to a suspicious person call, expecting an argument, maybe even a confrontation. Instead, he'd walked into a quiet war against cosmic unraveling and the man fighting. It was the very person someone had tried to report for being out of place. Karen had no idea what was going on, but she was about to. The silence that followed the stabilizer's activation felt deeper than quiet. It was absolute. The faint shimmer around the dome vanished, replaced by a stillness that seemed to stretch time itself. Jerome stared, still trying to process what he'd heard, while the two drones hovered overhead, recalibrating their sensors in real time. Their AI cores, designed to interpret subtle environmental shifts, were struggling to categorize the energy radiating from the device. Karen, still glued to her front porch, was growing more agitated by the second. She had expected drama, a take, maybe even a public scolding. She had practiced what she'd say to the officer, phrases like, "You see, I told you, and we just want to feel safe." But none of it was going as planned. Instead of marching over to arrest the man, the officer was talking to him like he was some kind of colleague. "What's going on over there?" she whispered aloud. CivicNet responded through the panel embedded in her porch wall, its voice neutral and synthetic. The individual in question has been verified as a Tier 1 research entity under the United Nations Dimensional Accord. Clearance, level, indigo, civilian action, not advised. Karen blinked at the words. That can't be right. He's just a guy with weird boxers. She stepped off her porch, her slippers tapping against the pavement as she crossed her pristine front yard. "Officer, excuse me. I'm the one who made the call." Jerome turned slowly. His body language had changed. He no longer looked like a local cop on a noise complaint. His hand rested near his belt, not on his weapon, but on his CivicNet relay tab, recording everything. "Yes, ma'am," he said calmly. I want to know what's happening. This man, he's installing some kind of device. I don't recognize it, and he doesn't look like, he doesn't act like he's supposed to be here." Dr. Vatu looked up then, his expression unreadable but polite. "And what exactly does someone acting like they belong look like, Ms. Karen Delaney?" she replied, folding her arms tightly. "I live right here. I've lived here for 18 years, and I know everyone on this block." "Indeed," Vatu said, voice measured. "And yet, none of your familiarity grants you jurisdiction over reality's fabric." Karen's face flushed. "I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood safe." From above, one of the drones issued a chime and projected a soft blue light onto the sidewalk between them. A translucent interface bloomed in the air, revealing archived social posts, neighborhood watch messages, and audio clips all linked to Karen. Each message held a similar tone. Complaints about outsiders, unfamiliar-looking individuals, and possible gang members based on vague observations. A pattern of racial bias, statistically verified and now made visible to everyone present. Karen's eyes widened in horror. "What is this? Why are you showing this?" Officer Hill didn't answer. He didn't have to. The drone's AI had flagged the call as a level 1 bias incident and, under local law, transparency protocols required the system to present contextual data in real time during disputed civilian interactions. "I'm not a racist," Karen said, voice rising. "I just didn't recognize him." "You didn't need to," Vatu replied quietly. "Recognition isn't required for respect." Then, as if the moment itself demanded punctuation, the stabilizer emitted a sudden surge. A ripple pulsed outward like a wave across the grass, distorting light, bending color. For one impossible second, the veil between dimensions lifted. The sky fractured into layers. Two versions of the neighborhood flickered in and out. Of phase 1 with twisted, crystalline trees and flickering shadows, another soaked in golden mist. A double moon shimmered overhead. Karen gasped and stumbled back. "What was that?" Jerome steadied himself, equally stunned. "Did we just see?" "Yes," Vatu said, a bleed-through, the multiverse pressing against the seams of your singularity. That's what I'm here to prevent. Karen couldn't speak. Her world, so neatly arranged in lawns and property lines, had just been revealed as a thin membrane covering something vast, terrifying, and beautiful. She was utterly speechless. For the first time in her life, Karen Delaney had no idea what to believe. The shimmering veil of reality had returned to normal, but the image was burned into her mind. The double moons, the fractured skies, the impossible trees from another world swaying as if they had always existed just inches behind the fabric of her own. And in the middle of it all stood the man she had called the police, and a man who, it now seemed, wasn't just allowed to be there, but needed to be. She stumbled back to her porch, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. Her worldview, her carefully maintained sense of order and familiarity had been shattered. She suddenly felt very small on the neatly trimmed lawn of Rosebridge Estates. Officer Hill was still standing near Dr. Vatu, absorbing the full gravity of what had just occurred. The drone footage confirmed it. The brief rift in dimensional layering had been visible, not just to the naked eye, but had left a detectable shift in the gravitational and electromagnetic fields across the entire block. He stared at the data streaming across his visor and realized something chilling. If Vatu hadn't been here, they might never have known it was happening. It was too late. I don't know how to write this in a report, Jerome said. Under his breath, Vatu gave a faint smile. You won't have to. The event is already logged through CivicNet and classified under Multiversal Stabilization Protocol. Your cooperation has been noted. You've done your part. Jerome raised an eyebrow. So what happens now? I continue my work, Vatu replied. And soon, others like me will be dispatched across the globe. There are other convergence points, some in cities, others in isolated valleys, or beneath oceans. Earth is entering a critical alignment. Within the next 5 years, your dimension will intersect with 4 others. If we fail to stabilize the harmonics at each junction, there could be a permanent collapse in spatial identity. Entire realities would bleed into each other. That doesn't sound survivable. For most, it wouldn't be. Jerome swallowed hard, looking around. At the idyllic neighborhood, it all seemed so fragile now, like a bubble floating in a storm. Karen, still listening from a distance, finally mustered the courage to speak. Why here? Why this place? It's just a suburb. Vatu turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Reality doesn't choose its weak points based on wealth or location. It chooses based on frequency and harmonic resonance. This land, your entire neighborhood, rests on what we call a thin place, a membrane stretched taut. You've probably felt it before, even if you couldn't explain it. That strange déjà vu, the flicker in the corner of your eye, the sense that something is watching. Karen's face paled. She had felt that many times, and he added, I was chosen, not just because of my expertise, but because this community needed to see someone like me doing this work. Because for the stabilization to last, people need to grow, not just scientifically, but socially, spiritually. We're not just fighting to keep realities separate. We're fighting for who humanity becomes when the veil lifts. Karen lowered her eyes. Her voice, when it returned, was quieter. I didn't know. I thought I was protecting something. You were, Vatu said gently. But it wasn't the truth. It was comfort, and comfort is a poor substitute for understanding. Jerome looked between them and exhaled slowly. Well, he said, straightening his shoulders, guess I'll mark the call as resolved. He turned to leave, but not before giving a nod, one of respect, not just protocol. Karen watched him drive away in silence. She didn't say another word. Behind her, CivicNet blinked softly on her wall panel. Bias report acknowledged. Suggested resource, empathy recalibration sessions, level 2. For once, Karen didn't swipe it away. She just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the stabilizer next door, knowing that everything she thought she knew about her world had changed. Forever.